good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to another edition of AIJAC Live Online. My name is Joel Burney, and it's fantastic to have you with us this evening. It's been a long time since we've last seen you, and it's great to have our virtual audience with us again, beaming around internationally, streaming live to YouTube, Facebook, and to our Zoom audience. Thank you all so much for being able to join us. Very, very brief housekeeping, ladies and gentlemen. Keep a lookout for the advertisement for our next webinar, which will hit your inboxes shortly. We'll also be having a moderated Q&A later on this evening. I'll go through the instructions as to how to ask Yossi a question later on. I'm sure many of you have many things to ask him. It's fantastic to now introduce our main event, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. It's been a while since we've seen him, but we're very lucky to have him this evening, and that's Brigadier General Yosef Kuperwasser, who is a Senior Project Manager at Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. He is a former Director General of the Ministry of International Affairs and Strategy. In his long career at the IDF, Brigadier General Coopervasa served as Assistant Defense Attaché for Intelligence at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C., Intelligence Officer of the IDF Central Command, and Head of Analysis and Production Division of the IDF Directorate of Military Intelligence. He had a significant role in determining Israel's methods of coping with terror, as well as regional developments, and sharing such analysis with the US and other countries. Coopervasa has authored a wide variety of publications on the Middle East, terrorism and intelligence, and he is an opinion contributor to Israeli daily paper Haaretz. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic for this evening is confronting renewed Palestinian terror and Iran's aggression. I would now like to hand over to AIJAC's Executive Director, Dr. Colin Rubenstein, to say a few words.
Thanks very much, Joel. Welcome, Yossi. Welcome, everybody. Tonight, we are fortunate to have Yossi, who, Joel has said, has great experience in Israel, of course, Washington, and very importantly for us, a participant in the annual Israel-Beersheba dialogue, strategic dialogue. And I hasten to add strong bipartisan support in Australia, and luminous is our new Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, Mark Dreyfus, Kim Beazley, and many other luminaries, together with Liberal luminaries over the years, have participated in that dialogue. Look forward to enhanced ties between Australia and Israel in all spheres, including security and defence, in coming years. And of course, we have just had an election in Australia, a very democratic election, and the people always get it right. And we have a very peaceful, orderly change of government. And despite some concerns, perhaps, about aspects of Labor policy on recognition of a Palestinian state, on the other hand, we know there are very knowledgeable and very empathetic and supportive members in this new government. I've already mentioned some of them, but we have many Rumble graduates, Foreign Minister Penny Wong, Treasurer Jim Chalmers, Brendan O'Connor, whatever ministry he gets, and so many others. So we're very confident going forward. We have a bipartisan opposition to the BDS. We have bipartisan support for the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, and of course, we have bipartisan support for working towards a two-state outcome in a negotiated way. So, very important for us to get accurate information about the Middle East, and who better to get that from than our guest this evening. These are very dangerous times, and of course, I think we're all heartened by the stance our new Prime Minister has taken in Tokyo today, and fully committed to the Quad and AUKUS and the variety of objectives embodied in that two agreement. So there are many issues in this unstable world, not only our region, of course, first and foremost at the moment, the Middle East, not to speak of Russia and its barbaric invasion of Ukraine that represents. In particular, we'll be asking Yossi to try and explain the nature and the extent, the reason for the recent wave of terrorism in Israel and perhaps how to cope with it. The truth about Abu Akla and her tragic deaths taking place essentially in a war zone, in a gunfight between Israeli forces and a terrorist group outside Jenin. The behavior of Iran and its proxies and its threat to the region and beyond, and the test for the historic positive Abraham cause in these circumstances. And with it, the Israeli government, how is it doing? Is it surviving? There's these issues, so many more, that Yossi will now address on this topic of confronting renewed Palestinian terror and Iran's escalating aggression. Yossi, welcome.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you, Joel. Thank you, Jeremy. I know you're always the Zoom viewers. It's a pleasure to be back with the Australian audience, and I have only good memories from my past experience speaking on AIJAC's Zoom event and visiting Australia. And I think Australia is a very strong friend of Israel, regardless of who is in government. That said, we have other problems. It's not only Australia that we have to worry about. And I would like to say right in the beginning, before I dive into the problems we have, I want to say something about our strengths. Israel is a strong country. It's a country that knows how to defend itself, has the capabilities to do that, in spite of the very serious challenges it faces. It is a very strong country militarily. It's also a very strong country technologically. It is a very strong country economically. These days, we have more money than we can even dream of, more resources. We don't have any unemployment. We are in a very good shape, to a large extent because of our high-tech and military industries that support the economic situation as well. And we are even politically and diplomatically in a strong position with the Abraham Accords that shape the Middle East in a different way than it used to be shaped in the past. And this is definitely in our favor and in the favor of all of those who are participating in these agreements. And we just heard this morning about the possibility of broadening the normalization efforts between us and our neighbors to include Saudi Arabia as well, with American help. So we should be in a good point to face the challenges we have. That said, on the positive side, I must say that the challenges are becoming more and more acute and more problematic. And the situation in regard of these challenges is very much like cooking a frog or lobster, depends what you want to cook. Where you put it in the water and the temperatures are rising, and you don't feel when it's reaching the boiling temperature, and next moment it's too late. And that's what's happening in all the 4 areas in which Israel is faced with severe challenges. First of all, in spite of what everybody else can say about the rating of or prioritization of the threats, I still think that the most important and most dangerous thing that is happening is the progress in the Iranian military nuclear program. Minister Gantz, our defense minister, who was in the United States in the last week, before leaving, gave a speech about the situation in this program. And if you analyze the numbers he gave about the program, you realize that there is a sharp increase in the pace in which the Iranians develop their program and the pace in which the Iranians enrich uranium. According to Gantz's figures, the Iranians already have today something like 60 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, which is something they never had before. And 60 kilograms means that in the last 3 months, they enriched about 30 kilograms before, because in February, they used to have only 33 kilograms. And if you compare that to the numbers they had in last November, which was like 17, it means that in the last 3 months, they produced twice as much as they did in the 3 months, in the 3 previous months. This is definitely something, they produce something like 10 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium a month, compared with 5 in the 3 previous months. This is a very concerning figure. That means that the Iranians are moving very fast towards having enough fissile material, or having the capability to have enough fissile material for several bombs within a very short period of time. The same happened with the 20% enriched uranium. They have, according to Gans, 350 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium, compared with 180 that they used to have in February, and 113 that they had in last November, which again tells you that the rate or the pace with which they enrich uranium to 20% has also doubled in the last 3 months. This means that they employ very advanced centrifuges for that purpose, and a greater number of centrifuges for this kind of enrichment, that puts them very close. It takes a decision to move from 60 or 20% to 90%, which is a military grade. But if they decide to do that, they are very close to having enough fissile material for a first explosive device within 2 weeks or something like that, for 2 explosive devices within 3 to 4 weeks, and for 5 to 6 explosive devices within 3 to 4 months. This means that Iran is deep into the area where it can be called a threshold country, a threshold nuclear country. And this is something that Israel in the past said that it's sort of a red line from an Israeli point of view. When Netanyahu presented this very famous drawing in the UN General Assembly in 2012, he spoke about 250 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium in the hands of the Iranians as a red line. We are far beyond that red line, and nothing is being done about it. And the Iranians use the time of the negotiations in Vienna in order to accumulate more and more uranium enriched to high levels that will enable them, once they decide to break out, the capability to produce enough fissile material for at least 5 bombs. That was the original plan, to have 5 bombs. They will be able to produce this kind of this amount of enriched uranium within no time, actually. Now, there is a big debate between the experts about how much time it's going to take them from that point to having the weapon itself. And some people think that it's going to take them something like 2 years. I'm much more pessimistic about it, and much more skeptical, because I think that the Iranians don't work in a linear way. They don't produce first of all the rich uranium, and then they will start worrying about how to make it a bomb, how to turn it into a bomb. We know that they have already produced uranium metal with 20% enriched uranium, and so they do make progress in the technological sphere in moving towards having a bomb based on 90% enriched uranium if they produce it. And I'm sure they do some other stuff as well. And we have to remember, we don't have any answers from the Iranians about all the questions regarding the potential military dimensions of their program that were open before entering the JCPOA. And we definitely don't have any answers about the new revelations that Israel brought to the table once we took the information from the nuclear archives in Tehran some 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And we don't have the answers in spite of the efforts of the International Atomic Energy Agency to convince the Iranians to cooperate. But there are 4 sites that were exposed just because we brought this archive. In a couple of them, anthropogenic uranium was found. That was something that everybody is worried about. The Iranians don't explain what was the source of this uranium, and definitely don't give any report and any information about where this uranium is now and how much uranium is there. And so definitely we have to assume that they have done all kinds of experiments and work on this uranium in order to shorten the time necessary for them to move from having highly enriched uranium at a military level, 90% or so, towards having the capability to produce a bomb. And of course, the other element needed, which is the missiles, is something that they have already made a very important progress in. and they have produced a lot of missiles that can carry warheads, nuclear warheads. So we should be very worried about the nuclear program. Unfortunately, it seems that although Israel and the United States share the commitment not to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, they still do not agree about the way to move in the direction. And while we insist on stopping Iran where it is, the Americans are interested in bringing Iran back to the JCPOA, which will only gain something like 2 years, but allow the Iranians to have a lot of money, to promote other activities I'm going to speak about in a second, that are going to allow them to become the hegemon power in the Middle East, even without having the nuclear weapon, but still allow them to have legitimately progress towards having not only 5 nuclear weapons, but 100 or any number they choose to have within less than 9 years. So this, in our mind, here in Israel, is ridiculous and extremely dangerous. And we still don't see eye to eye with the Americans on that matter. And the Americans, although they are not willing to give up on keeping the Iranian Revolutionary Guards on the list of the terrorist organization, they are nevertheless interested in moving back towards the JCPOA, and this is a source of disagreement. That said, we do cooperate with the Americans on trying to convince the Iranians that moving forward is going to be dangerous, and we are in the midst of a big military exercise in which we cooperate with the Americans in modeling the attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities, which is a clear message to Iran: be careful, don't move from where you are towards having fissile material, and don't move towards having producing 90% enriched uranium, which is something we and Americans both don't want to see happening. So this is about this area, which is a very dangerous threat that we are facing right now. Of course, the other element that we have to worry about when we talk about Iran is the ongoing effort of the Iranians to entrench their forces in Syria and move it and turn Syria into a base from which they can operate against Israel, and at the same time to deliver weaponry, advanced weaponry to Hezbollah in Lebanon, in an attempt to allow them to have a precisely guided munition, be it guided unmanned air vehicles or missiles that would replace the rockets and turn them into precisely guided munition. That is something that Israel has been working day in, day out to prevent, with our efforts to hit the Iranian targets and the Iranian shipments of arms for Hezbollah while they are in Syria. Fortunately, we developed some sort of rules of engagement on that matter that allow us to operate in Syria with only limited repercussions and retaliation from the Iranians. But Lebanon itself remains under a different set of rules of engagement in which we are supposed to be very careful when we operate in Lebanon, or if we want to operate in Lebanon, because there is this threat by Hezbollah that if something like that happens, all hell is loose, and we have to worry about escalation. This is where we stand there. The Iranians managed to make progress in strengthening their allies. They do it much slower than what they wish to do it because of our activities, but it's still happening. And we are talking about tens of thousands, maybe up to 150,000 rockets in the hands of Hezbollah, advanced UAVs that they operate, and so on and so forth. And it's not only Hezbollah, Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad also get the Iranian support in improving their capabilities, their military capabilities, and they are boasting about it all the time. And of course, the Iranian proxies in Iraq and in Yemen are also in the same, enjoying the same Iranian support. And this is today, before there is a JCPOA, return to JCPOA with all the fortunes that Iran is going to get. Just imagine what's going to happen if the Iranians are going to re-enter the JCPOA and get all the money that awaits them. Tens of billions of dollars await them if they rejoin the JCPOA. So we are very concerned about that. and realize that everything we do in this, what's called the campaign between the wars, is good in slowing down the progress the Iranians have, but not in blocking and stopping it altogether. And the third source of concern we have is what's happening in the Palestinian context. The Palestinians identify Israel's weaknesses. They understand that Israel is not willing to use force in order to rearrange the situation in the context of the Palestinian problem, especially not to use it against Gaza. We saw it in the Guardian of the Walls operation last year, where the options of taking the really severe measures against Hamas and not only denying them from the ability to hit the targets in Israel with the rockets, but also to hit their key figures and to maybe carry out a ground operation were not on the agenda for Israel. And they realized that this was, together with all kinds of limits that Israel has in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority, because Israel is totally committed to strengthening the Palestinian Authority while the Palestinian Authority operates against Israel in all the potential fields, paying salaries to terrorists for carrying out attacks against Israelis, inciting against Israel, operating against Israel in the international community, in international fora, in the International Criminal Court and elsewhere. In spite of all that, Israel is totally committed to supporting the Palestinian Authority, and at the same time, Israel has a problem with the Israeli Arabs because it has to limit its activities against those who are involved in radical activities against Israel, like the northern chapter of the Islamic movement and the other factions within the Israeli Arabs that are very close to supporting terror or even support terrorism, and some of them are also involved in terrorism. Israel doesn't take steps against them for all kinds of political reasons and others. So what's happening now is that we see the unification of the Palestinian different factions in a heightened campaign against Israel, including some manifestation in terror attacks that we witnessed in this last terror wave that included people that were not organized in the context of a certain terror organization. It was not carried out by Hamas, it was not carried out even by Fatah, although a lot of Hamas supporters and Fatah supporters were involved in these terror activities, and also some Islamic State supporters from within the Israeli Arabs were involved in that. And so this allows some sort of a safety net for Hamas and for Fatah, because these are not people that are direct members of the organizations. But what they do is they hit up the incitement efforts, both directly in the textbooks and in messages coming from the leadership from both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And they use both nationalistic and religious elements in their incitement, which is very effective in convincing people that the time is up to do something. And there will always be somebody who will translate the messages coming from the incitement into activity. And they know this is going to happen, and they don't have to carry the direct responsibility for that situation. So what we have is an uprise in the amount of terrorism that we are facing. In the last couple of months, we had about 10 terror attacks every month. That goes beyond the usual level of terrorism that nobody counts, which is the stone throwing and the Molotov cocktail hurling. This nobody even counts. And some other new features of this terror wave was that it was not confined to the areas that were under Israeli control in the Judea and Samaria areas, where the way we got used to in the last couple of years. And it was not even confined to Jerusalem, but it took place in areas inside what we call the Green Line Israel. And this, of course, had a very important impact on the sense of security of Israelis. And it was very effective in sowing fear in the hearts of Israelis, and forced Israel to do something that is beyond what we used to do before. And the major thing we did was we embarked on the operation wave breaker that was carried out mainly in the Jenin area and the northern part of the Judea and Samaria. And in this context, as you all know, Shirin Abu, the journalist from Al Jazeera, lost her life. Nobody knows what happened. We are all waiting for the investigation to be carried out, but it's not possible to carry it out because the Palestinians refuse to give the weapon that was used in this respect to Israel to check. And we have a problem with that. We are also facing in this respect a major rise in the activities against Israel in the international fora, as the Palestinians take advantage of this death in order to wage a campaign of delegitimization against Israel. No wonder, this is just a part of a big campaign, and this is the fourth element in which we are challenged, which is the international effort to demonize Israel and to delegitimize Israel. And we see that not only by the activities of the Palestinians, both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and its affiliates, but also in the activities of many radical left-wing people around the world that take advantage of that and try to demonize Israel. What we are worried most in this respect is what's going on in the United States. Because voices that are coming from the extreme left wing of the Democratic Party there are trying to question the special relations between Israel and the United States, which is a very important element in our national security, and we have to make sure that this doesn't happen. Unfortunately, they managed to, in all kinds of tricks, to have some impact on the way the special relations between Israel and the United States develop. That's not a direct and not immediate threat. It's not the same kind of threat that we see with the Iran nuclear program or with the terror wave the Palestinians wage against us. But in the long term, this is something that we are quite worried about, and we have to take into account that we have to take steps against it right now. So altogether, all these elements form a very challenging environment for Israel, that not always the tools we have in order to cope with it are fit for this challenge. For example, we are not well equipped in order to cope with the challenges coming from the Palestinian territory, and especially not the Israeli Arabs, the terrain that we sort of didn't think as a source of security challenge. But right now is maybe the most disturbing issue that's happening in Israel is the rise up of Palestinian nationalistic feelings and religious Islamic feelings within the Israeli Arabs that we are not well equipped to deal with. Giving money to the Palestinian Arabs is good maybe for political reasons and stabilizing the coalition, but it's not necessarily something that is answering the concerns of those Arabs living in Israel that want to see a change in some political matters and not only in economic matters, and they don't go to the streets because they have some economic difficulties. This is a very minor element in that driving them to the streets and to taking out all kinds of demonstrations and acts that are very disturbing from an Israeli point of view. So we have to sit to the table and think, what do we do about all these things? We are right now thinking about establishing and maybe taking the first steps towards establishing a national guard in Israel that will be more capable to deal with this matter. And then we have all kinds of other ideas of what can be done in order to be better fit to deal with the threats we are facing. I'll stop here. I think it's about 25 minutes and open it to questions. I guess you have some.
Thank you, Yossi. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for the question and answer session. So down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button called Reactions. You can hit the Reactions button and use the Raise Hand feature to provide me with the silent notification of your intention to ask Yossi a question. So if we can see some hands up, we will start the questions off. I can't see his hand. Oh, there it goes. I'm going to go, as usual, to AIJAC's Dr. Svi Fleischer for the first question.
Hi, Yossi. Thank you very much. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the situation in Gaza. You were saying that you think that Israel's been a bit unable, sort of timid or looking weak. Is there an alternative, a clear alternative to the current situation where they're avoiding trouble, letting the Qataris sort of prop up the Hamas regime without causing another explosion? Obviously, Israel would prefer to avoid another war. Is there a program that would work, in your view, that does not involve yet another Gaza war?
Well, thank you for the question. It's, as you know, the Hamas leadership is now heating up the situation by throwing all kinds of threats that if Israel carry out the flags march in Jerusalem on the 29th, and if Israel doesn't take steps to make sure that no Jew say any words of prayer on Temple Mount, then God knows what's going to happen. They are going to take severe measures. They don't specify what they're going to do. And I think they are trying to make sure that there's some ambiguity on regarding their options. I feel my way of reading it is that they do not mean to put Gaza in harm's way. The situation there is still very problematic from their point of view. They haven't reconstructed the damages done last year. Israel gives working permits for many Gazans more than ever in the last 10 years. So it's there's a resentment within the Gaza citizens to see another war emerging, and they have to take this into account. And they would prefer to see this situation somehow kept in the confines of Jerusalem and the Israeli Arabs and the Judea and Samaria areas, where they would like to see more terror, if necessary, coming from there, and not involving them directly. Yes, they have the capability, they have the option if they wish to, and they are of course working very hard to gain more and more capabilities just in case. But I don't think they're very eager to resume the war in Gaza. That said, escalation can happen, and God knows the nature of escalation that is uncontrolled. It can involve, and there are many people in Israel that would like to see something more decisive taken against Hamas in Gaza. Not the leadership and not the security establishment, but there are voices like that in Israel, and we have to take this into account. We have to be, by the way, prepared for doing that, because, as I said before, this feeling that of Hamas that Israel is not going to really take severe measures against it makes Hamas much more self-confident, and allows it to come up with more extreme threats against Israel. And we have to make sure that they don't follow these threats. In Gaza itself, the situation is problematic still, although I always say that the way people portray how difficult the situation in Gaza is a little bit more than what it really is. I mean, according to the reports in earlier years, by 2020, Gaza should have been a place that nobody can live in, and it's a disaster, area of disaster, and so on and so forth. And what we see is that even though we carried out the operation in 2021, it's still a place that many people live in. It's not the best place to live in, but it's a place that is livable, and with difficulties. And that's why we are committed in Israel to improve the living conditions in Gaza, and we are also committed to improve the living conditions in the other areas populated by Palestinians in the Judea and Samaria area, where the Palestinian Authority rules. And we are doing very strong efforts to help the Palestinians, and that's why we allow the Qataris to bring in. We allow them to bring in money in the previous cases, and now there's a new arrangement in which they send the oil and the Hamas can use the oil revenues in order to take care of their people in Gaza. And that's the way the situation is taken care of by Israel. And by allowing more than 10,000 people to work in Israel, we ease the pressures in Gaza considerably. And we also allow more than 100,000 Palestinians to work in Israel coming from Judea and Samaria. So it's these are the steps that allow us to ease the pressures that the Palestinians contend with. That said, sometimes we are a little bit, we are going to sometimes too far, and, especially with the issue of the money given to the Palestinian Authority. I think the Palestinian Authority feels that there's no price to pay for operating against Israel and inciting against Israel, and they pay salaries to the terrorists that carry out the attacks, including the terrorists that carried out the attacks in the last 2 months. They get paid by the Palestinian Authority, and we enable them to pay them salaries, huge salaries, very nice salaries are being paid by the Palestinian Authority to these terrorists. This is something that is beyond my understanding and beyond anybody's understanding. I can tell you, I was sitting with the Americans that are in charge of that, and complaining about the fact that the Americans too are giving money to the Palestinian Authority and to the Palestinians. And the Americans told me, no, we don't give money to the Palestinian Authority. We give money directly to the Palestinian people. You give money to the Palestinian Authority, so don't come and complain to us. You give money to the Palestinian Authority by all kinds of loans that you give them that are not actually loans, they are grants. And this is something that is unacceptable. And this I heard from this Biden administration officials. So it's this is something very strange that we do just in order to help the Palestinians have a better capability to confront the economic difficulties that in my mind are a little bit exaggerated. But that's what we do. We made clear, by the way, that we have no intention to change anything in the status quo that is relevant to the Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif, as the Palestinians and the Muslims call it. And I hope that this would help in avoiding an escalation, because Israel doesn't have any interest in an escalation. And we, at the same time, do want to celebrate our reunification of Jerusalem and our sovereignty in Jerusalem. And that's why we are planning to have this flags dance, as we call it, on Jerusalem Day, or actually a couple of days after Jerusalem Day, in Jerusalem, as we in the same place that we conducted it in previous years, including the Damascus Gate. And I hope this is going to somehow go securely and without causing any sort of escalation. I think on this issue, the Palestinians are speaking highly, but are less committed to carry out any operation. The Temple Mount itself is more sensitive, and I hope that we shall be able to avoid that. And as I said, I don't think they are very eager to see an escalation themselves, as long as Gaza is concerned. They would like very much to see the Palestinian Authority having to deal with more problems in Jerusalem and especially in the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority.
Thank you, Yossi. I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Ran Porat.
Shalom, Cooper. It's a pleasure to see you and to listen to you again. If I may ask 2 quick questions. One, if you can comment about the assassination at the heart of Tehran and what it means, if it is a change in direction or policy of whoever is responsible. And the second thing is that the frog-like reality that you point out to, is it a result of 20 years of giving up on trying to resolve the different challenges in Iran, in Lebanon, in the Palestinian arena, and just reducing ourselves or Israel to conflict management or conflict minimalization instead of trying to find an overall solution with some vision?
Well, first of all, about the assassination in Tehran. I can understand why many Iranians think Israel was involved in that. I mean, definitely the Australians didn't do it, right? So, so you look for who has an interest in that. Could be that he was flirting with some woman, some lady that was married and their husband didn't like it. Could be. Another option is that since most information claims that he was a member of Unit 840 of the Revolutionary Guards that was involved in carrying out attacks against Israel, and was directly involved in several attempts to hit Israelis along the borders in Syria and elsewhere, and was involved recently, as our security agency said, in attempts to kidnap Israel, bring them to Europe and other places in the Arab world in order to kidnap them. It makes sense that maybe Israel had an interest in seeing him eliminated. Is it something new? I think not, because such assassinations in Iran happen once in a while. It's nothing new. There is some sort of a common denomination between all these cases, that most of the people that lose their lives are somehow involved in activities Israel is not very fond of. So I guess there's a reason to believe that Israel is involved with that. Definitely, these kind of assassinations are a source of major embarrassment for the Iranian regime, because definitely it seems that it cannot protect its own people. Coming back to Fakhrizadeh and many others, and it's definitely a source of frustration and a show of weakness of the regime. That's why whenever something like that happens, they immediately issue a declaration that they just arrested an Israeli spying cell. Nobody believes that to be true, and they are very frustrated. It's this is not the only element that makes them frustrated. They are now confronting a very strong wave of demonstrations due to the price rises in Iran, where people are more and more courageous in their acts and go out to the street in spite of them being targeted by the Iranian security apparatuses, including mainly the Basij. And I just saw yesterday that all the officials in the province of Yazd left the offices because they cannot control the situation anymore. The situation in Iran is very dire and very problematic. And it's not problematic only in Iran itself, it's also problematic in other areas that are of concern for the Iranians. Israel keeps hitting the shipments of arms in Syria and on the way to Lebanon. Israel just gave information about another route that is used by the Iranians for that purpose, involving high-ranking people in Hezbollah. Hezbollah didn't do well in the elections in Lebanon, another source of concern for the Iranians. And they don't manage so far to convince the Americans to rejoin JCPOA on Iranian terms and take the IRGC off the foreign terrorist organizations list. There are many concerns for the Iranians. Having said that, they compensate for all of that by what I described before regarding their nuclear program, where they make very considerable and dangerous progress, and not enough is being done about that. And that is coming back to your second question. That is what we have to worry about. That in spite of everything that we do very successfully in conflict management, taking into account the severity of the problems we face, we managed to keep them at bay in most cases. In the case of the Iranian nuclear program, although the Iranians could have had a nuclear weapon 15 years ago, we managed already to postpone the time they are going to have the weapon by more than 15 years, okay? It's a nice achievement, but it's not good enough. We didn't manage to stop it altogether, and this is something that at a certain point we might have to do. And that this time is becoming closer and closer, because Minister Gantz said in this speech that I mentioned in the beginning, he said, as time goes by, the difficulty of taking care of the Iranian nuclear project in a way that is decisive is becoming more and more demanding. And that's why we don't have all the time in the world before we are supposed to take steps that are decisive in this context. And this is where the major source of escalation may come from, because time is not necessarily on our side. Yes, we do take advantage of the time as well. We prepare, we train, we have joint the drills with the Americans on that. We deliver messages to the Iranians, and we develop our capabilities. But the progress, the pace with which the Iranians are now moving towards having the capability to produce nuclear weapons is much faster than it used to be in the past. Same goes with the Palestinians. We focused on managing the conflict, as you said, and we were relatively successful. And the amount of terror we were experiencing was considered by many in Israel as bearable. Not that nobody knows what does it mean, bearable terror, but the amount of attacks was limited. But once the terror moved into from the organized terror to everybody, every person that is exposed to this incitement can be the next terrorist. And this means that we can have terrorists from amongst the Israeli Arabs as well. We are exposed everywhere. It can happen in Bnei Brak or in Hadera or in Beersheba or in Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv. This is a situation where we have to think about changing our course of action and being more decisive in our way of handling the problem. And this calls for all kinds of legal changes and of different kind of arranging ourselves to cope with these problems than the ones we had until now. So yes, we are paying the price of this managing the conflict all the time, and the time gets closer. That's what I said about the temperature in this cooking. Temperatures is getting closer and closer to boiling, and this means that if we want to cool the water, we have to take more decisive actions than we used to take until now.
Thank you, Yossi. I'm now going to hand over to Colin to ask the next question.
Thank you. I apologize for the audio, but you've discussed a wide range of factors regarding Iran, but what do you see as the most desirable outcome in the immediate future, particularly with regard to the JCPOA negotiations? And could I switch gears to thanking Iran in a way for helping form the historic Abraham Accords, and ask, can those Abraham Accords actually be expanded? For example, is there a possibility of Saudi Arabia actually joining in going forward?
Well, what we would like to see now is more pressure on Iran that would stop it from keeping moving forward, and clarifying to Iran that if they do, there is a plan B that is decisive action that can be kinetic, but not necessarily. Can take other forms of action that would make the price of moving forward too high for the regime to afford. And that's what needs to be done. Not going back to the JCPOA, which guarantees them everything they want, just not now, but in 2 to 4 to 6 years. That's dangerous, and it's not kicking the can down the road. It's every kick that you give to the can, it becomes bigger and bigger and more explosive. So that makes no sense. We want to see pressure being put on the Iranians to stop the program, not in return to some unbelievable goodies, or not stopping it at all, not just delaying it. That's nothing, no justification for giving the Iranians everything they want. Unfortunately, we don't see eye to eye with the Americans on that, and that's why we keep saying we are not going to be a part of the JCPOA. If you manage to go back to the JCPOA, we'll take the necessary steps to protect ourselves and to prevent Iran from having the capability to produce nuclear weapons. And they are already almost there. So we have to take steps to stop them. And I think this visit of Gantz to this joint exercise that we are having with them right now, the visit of Biden to Israel, are all meant from an Israeli point of view to try to convince the Americans, look, this train has left the station. The idea of going back to the JCPOA is not relevant anymore. Let's focus on plan B and make sure that the Iranians don't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons and not get anything in return for delaying the production of the nuclear arsenal just a little bit, and they're having the capability to produce a much bigger arsenal than the one they are trying to produce now. That's the message we are going to deliver to the Americans. And we have to thank the Iranians, by the way, not only for the Abraham Accords, but also for not allowing the Americans to rejoin the JCPOA until now. If the Iranians would be a little bit more flexible, the Americans would have would have re-entered the JCPOA a long time ago. And but it's the big appetite that the Iranians have, and their understanding that the Americans are weak and the Americans are eager to enter the agreement, and the Americans are not able to stand against them because in Afghanistan, because of what happened in Ukraine, because of what happens all over the Middle East. That led them to the conclusion that the Americans are weak and they can raise their price. And they raised it to a point where even the Americans couldn't pay them what they wanted. And this is where we stand right now. But the Americans still want to believe that they can go back to the JCPOA. We think that this is not relevant anymore. And we hope that the Americans will join us in putting real pressure over Iran. Now, for that purpose, for putting real pressure over Iran, we need the Arab world. And definitely the Iranians were very helpful in allowing or creating the environment that enabled us to join hands with the Arabs that are worried about Iran. But this was not the only thing. I mean, look, Morocco, yes, it was concerned about Iran because the Iranians were helping the Polisario through their embassy in Algeria. But this was not the main reason why they joined the Abraham Accords. And we have good relations with the members of the Abraham Accords beyond just trying to face Iran. And I think what we are proving through the Abraham Accord now, and that's the burden of the proof is on us. We are trying hard to show that we can prove it, is that cooperation with Israel is good for everybody, not only because of the need to face Iran. Yes, this is one element, but a very important one. But this is not the only thing. We can cooperate on many other things. And we can create people-to-people environment that would make everybody benefit from normal relations with Israel. And I think this is something that we are proving through our very intensive relationship with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco. The Sudan is lagging behind, unfortunately, and we are very hopeful that we should be able to convince the American administration to join hands with us in widening and broadening the agreement to include also Saudi Arabia and other states, and not only because of Iran. And that is the direction where this is moving. Unfortunately, I think there's an option that if the JCPOA is revived, and the Iranians will show the Middle East that they won, and it's survived on their conditions. And this would mean that they had the upper hand in their struggle against the United States and Israel. This might have some chilling effect on the Abraham Accord, because everybody would say, we joined the Abraham Accord because we thought we don't get only better relations with Israel, but also with the United States. But it turns out the right way to have good terms with the United States is the way that the Iranians are using, and that might be a bad message for the Abraham Accords as well. For the time being, it's working very well, and definitely, yes, the need to face Iran is one of the major elements that stand behind them. As Prime Minister Netanyahu used to say at the time, his appearance in the Congress was of very important value in this respect. I think that also the decision to be friends of Israel had other roots as well. And anyhow, I'm very happy that it's happening.
Thank you, Yossi. I'll now hand over to AIJAC's Ovid Lobel.
Hi, Yossi. Thanks for doing this. I wanted to ask you about a country that we didn't really mention during this talk, Turkey. So there have been a lot of high-level discussions and reciprocal visits between Turkey and Israel, and it looks like they're at least trying to achieve normalization. So A, what do you think the prospects for that normalization are? And B, could we ever see Turkey change its relationship with either Hamas or Iran, if that happened?
Well, first of all, definitely we can. Thank you for the question, but we definitely can. As long as Erdogan is in charge, I think the chances are he's very cautious on that issue, but he's playing around with the idea of doing that. He did take some steps and limits on Hamas activities, but not enough yet. He's promised again and again to do more. We have to follow it very carefully. As we say in Hebrew, kabdeu and v'chashdeu, we have to respect him, but at the same time remain suspicious, because it's not easy. We know where he's coming from. He was a clear supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was very close to Hamas and allowed Hamas to operate on operational matters from Turkey. So it's very sensitive matter. We have to see that something changes. It has not happened yet. But yes, Turkey is now trying to be a more positive player in the Middle East in general, including vis-a-vis Israel. And if we can improve the relations with Turkey and take out from the camp of the pro-Hamas and anti-Israel and pro-terrorism camp, then we are able to weaken this camp and weaken Hamas, and we should try to do that. We should be careful not to do it at the expense of the things we have developed during the years of tension with Turkey. Like, for example, the very special strategic relations we have developed with Cyprus and with Greece. And so we have to clarify to the Turks that there's no quid pro quo on that matters. And I think we are delivering this message very clearly. And the exercise that we are carrying out now together with the Americans in Cyprus is one message in that respect. And the ongoing visits, reciprocal visits between us and the Greek and the Cypriots are also there in order to send this message to the Turks. Listen, we would like to have better relations with you, but not at the expense of our relations with the Greece and Cyprus. Let's see. We move with the motion now, and would like to see if the Turks really mean business, or is it just before the elections, and then we shall see a different approach. We don't have full trust in the Turks, but if we manage to see better relations with Turkey, why not? We were cooperating with them indirectly in the Nagorno-Karabakh case. We are able to work with the Turks. A very long history of cooperating with the Turks that we cherish very much and was successful. If Erdogan wants to go in this direction, he is more than welcome, and we shall find ways to cooperate.
Thank you, Yossi. I'll now hand over to Gus Lira for a quick question.
Thank you very much. And another country which I haven't heard mentioned is Pakistan, the other major Muslim country which does have nuclear weapons. Pakistan is ostensibly an ally of the Americans. Why hasn't Pakistan come into the discussion about containing Iran more than we have heard?
Well, first of all, we do, from our point of view, we do look at the possibility of improving relations with Pakistan. We would like very much that to happen. And just recently there was a visit here of a Pakistani journalist, and we are trying to see if this is a possibility. The Pakistani regime is not very interested in that, and it takes more pro-Islamic positions. But this doesn't mean that we have to give up on our efforts, and we saw it with the Erdogan case just as well. An Islamist that is willing to reconsider the relations with Israel, it's always welcome, and we are ready and we are open. Same with Pakistan. What we are worried about Pakistan is two levels. First is that they don't do enough in containing Iran. And the second is that we are worried that if the Iranians are going to move forward with their nuclear project, then there is some sort of an understanding between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan that the Pakistanis will help the Saudis gain access of nuclear weapons in one way or another, that we ourselves not sure what is this way going to look like. And by that help some sort of nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Both things are things that we would like to discuss with the Pakistanis and see that they are doing better. We all know that in the past, the Pakistanis not only didn't help in containing Iran and preventing it from becoming a nuclear force, but actually Abdul Qadir Khan gave them the information that was in the basis of their project. So this is something that is very worrying, and we definitely want to make sure that anything like that would not happen in the future, because as I said, still the one thing that keeps the Iranians away from having a weapon is this technology that would allow them to, and we believe that they do control much of it, but I'm not sure to what extent they are sure about it. And if they get from the Iranians some more from the Pakistanis more information about what needs to be done in order to move from having fissile material to having a bomb, this is something very dangerous, and we have to make sure that the Pakistanis don't get involved in that. And they can do more than that, but at least not help the Iranians. That's the most important thing that they should do. And not help the Saudis as well. So we don't want an arms race, nuclear arms race in the region, even if the Iranians manage to move forward. So it's we have expectations from Pakistan, and we believe that just like with Turkey and other countries, cooperation with Pakistan is going to be in the benefit of Pakistan, and they can gain a lot of improving relations with us. We haven't seen yet, well, with the exception of here and there, some case of some discussions, intelligence connections and things like that. We haven't much going on in this realm so far, and it's a pity. We don't think that our special relations with India should be a reason for the Pakistanis not to move forward in building up the relations with Israel. And there are some Pakistanis who say that this is the case, and we should improve relations with Israel. I think that if Pakistan listens to them more, they're going to gain much more than lose.
Thank you, Yossi. I'll now hand over to AIJAC's Jamie Hymes for the final question.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks for that, Yossi. You mentioned earlier that that one of the setbacks that Iran had was the result of the elections in Lebanon. So I'm just wondering whether Hezbollah's losses there, will actually have any impact on their power there, or is it something they'll just be able to work around? Will that actually benefit Israel in any way? Thanks.
Well, I don't expect. Hi, Jamie. I don't expect a major change in Lebanon, but the question is what was the alternative? The alternative of Hezbollah taking over, that was the thing that the Iranians were trying to achieve. And that was prevented and deprived from them. And that by itself is something good. Nevertheless, Hezbollah is very strong in Lebanon and will remain very strong. It's going to be extremely difficult and there's no coalition strong enough in order to force Hezbollah to give up its arms or change its policies. So we should continue seeing Hezbollah as a very important player in the Lebanese scene. And the situation in Lebanon is dire for everybody because of economic difficulties and the lack of governance and many other elements and the financial situation. And that's these all are things that worry every Lebanese. I think the message from what happens there, and it's the same message with what's happening in Iraq, is that with all the investments that the Iranians did they didn't manage to convince the people in both Iraq and Lebanon to support the takeover of their countries by Iranian stooges. And that is something very important that gives at least some hope for the future. None of the elements that are against an Iranian takeover is strong enough by itself to kick the Iranians out. That's a pity. But at least they can prevent Iran from taking over. And that is something very important. And we have to remember, this is all done without the international community supporting them at all. Nobody helps the good guys in Lebanon. Nobody helps the good guys in Iraq. They have to do that by their own courage, their own conviction, and with the worst of conditions. Look at what's happening in Iran itself right now. The public is against the regime, and they get no support from the international community. Nobody covers these demonstrations in the international media as if they didn't take place. It's amazing how, in spite of all of that, the people go out to the streets, demonstrate, vote the way they vote, where they're allowed to vote in Lebanon or in Iraq. They cannot vote the way they want to vote in Iran. And they take the risks of doing that because not just a few lost their lives in fighting against this Iranian takeover. And I think this is a very important message and gives something to cling to when you try to improve the situation in those places and understand that the people want something better than being ruled by Iranian proxies.
Thank you very much, Yossi. I'll now hand over to Colin for a quick vote of thanks.
Thanks, Joel. Yossi, we're very much in your debt. You've covered an amazing amount of territory with the anticipated realism and perceptiveness, and certainly very informative analysis for us. You've highlighted the centrality of the Iran factor, in case we happen to forget it, and the surging protests that are taking place right now, hopefully are an indicator of growing resentment internally to that regime, which may have an effect going forward, but only with the opposition of the international community, and hopefully, as you say, the United States will listen to the sound advice being given by Israel and Arab countries going forward to prevent Iran becoming a threshold state, and the need for Israel and its ability to fight this surge of terrorism which we're now seeing. Very importantly as well, the effort to demonize and delegitimize Israel, unfortunately, continues in international fora. And that's why we're hopeful here in Australia that Australia's strong support of Israel and resisting these efforts to undermine and delegitimize Israel will continue to take place by our new government, because there is very strong bipartisan support for Australia-Israel relations and for the welfare and security of Israel in Canberra. So thank you very much on behalf of all of us at AIJAC. And Joel, it's over to you to wind things up.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for. Thank you again, Yossi, for a brilliant presentation. Thank you, Colin, for your participation tonight as well. Please be on the lookout for the next invitation for our next webinar, which will be in your inboxes shortly. If you'd like to watch this episode again, send it to a friend, or watch any of our previous episodes, please head to the AIJAC YouTube channel. This full webinar will be available right at the conclusion of this webinar. Again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you soon.